Would the Celtics really have to bribe another team just to take Jrue Holiday? It sounds unthinkable, but that's exactly what rival executives are whispering behind closed doors. Jrue Holiday, a defensive savant, a two-time NBA champion, and the ultimate teammate, might not be tradable unless the Celtics attach a sweetener, a pick, or maybe more than one. The shocking part, we're not talking about an aging role player hanging onto the edge of a roster. We're talking about the same Jrue Holiday who helped shut down Luka Dončić in the NBA Finals, the same guard who turned chaotic playoff moments into masterclasses in poise. And yet, here we are. So what's going on? At the core of this dilemma is Holiday's massive contract, $104 million still owed over the next 3 seasons. For a 34-year-old, even with his elite defensive IQ and championship pedigree, that's a lot of money for a player whose offensive production has steadily declined, and whose best athletic years are clearly in the rearview mirror. Teams love what Holiday brings. They just don't want to pay for it. Not at that price. Not without getting something else in return. This is the uncomfortable truth Boston doesn't want to admit. In the cold, transactional logic of the modern NBA, sentiment doesn't move the needle. Rings don't erase tax bills. And loyalty? That's for the fans, not for front offices staring down the second apron and the new CBA's brutal penalties. Boston has to shed salary this summer, or they risk sabotaging their flexibility for years. Holiday, despite his contributions, has become the most logical casualty of the team's financial success. But here's where things get even murkier. According to insider Jake Fisher, multiple front offices have quietly let it be known. If Boston wants to offload Holiday, they'll need to pay up, not in cash, in draft picks. In a league where even marginal cap space is treated like gold, teams aren't just absorbing $104 million without extracting blood. And for a team like Boston, who already owes future picks in other deals, that price could be steep. So now the Celtics are caught between loyalty and logic, legacy and ledger. Do they sacrifice future assets just to move a player who was vital to a title run 1 season ago? Or do they keep Holiday, potentially limit their ability to improve elsewhere, and run the risk of holding a depreciating asset as he ages into his mid-30s? Here's the other twist no one's talking about. What if this isn't really about Holiday at all? What if the real play is deeper, a strategic smokescreen to mask bigger ambitions? Could Brad Stevens be positioning Holiday as a trade facilitator for something far larger? A swing for another star? A covert attempt to grab a rising young player still on a rookie deal, but with all-star upside? The inclusion of a draft pick might not be a cost. It might be the bait. Think about it. The Celtics aren't just any franchise. They're defending champions. Their window is now. Wasting time isn't an option. If they're dangling Holiday, it's because they've already gamed out what comes next. And that's where things get terrifying for the rest of the league. Because if Boston's willing to part with an anchor like Jrue, it means they've already identified something they believe is better. Possible landing spots. Let's just say they're not obvious. Houston is being floated. On paper, it makes sense. Young core, defensive identity, and a clear need for veteran leadership. But would they really blow up cap space and flexibility to add a 34-year-old who isn't a volume scorer? Or are they hoping to flip Holiday again in a second? Deal? That's not crazy. In fact, in today's NBA, it's chess, not checkers. Orlando is another name tossed around. Strong, defensive culture. Young stars. In desperate need of someone who can hit a clutch corner 3 and teach discipline. But again, here's the catch. Do the Magic want Holiday, or just what he represents? Do they want a leader, or are they looking for someone younger who fits the timeline of Paolo Banchero and Franz Wagner? Would they actually pay for Jrue? Or would they just wait until Boston gets desperate enough to give him away? And here's the real grenade. What if no one wants Holiday at that price? What if Brad Stevens waits too long and Jrue's value sinks even further? The longer this drags, the more desperate Boston looks. That's when teams start circling like sharks, knowing the Celtics don't have leverage. And that's when things get dangerous. Not just for Holiday, but for Boston's entire blueprint. Because once you start attaching picks to get rid of players, it signals one thing: you're trapped. That's the irony here. Jrue Holiday helped the Celtics escape their playoff purgatory. Now, to keep winning, they might have to give up a piece of their future just to walk away from him. So the question lingers, is Jrue Holiday still a championship asset or a financial liability dressed in a ring? And if Boston truly believes they need to pay to move him, what does that say about the market's view of everyone else on the roster? The summer hasn't even started, but the storm is already gathering. One decision could echo for years, and the clock is ticking. What if the Celtics' best trade chip is also their biggest liability? At first glance, Kristaps Porzingis might look like a golden ticket for the Boston Celtics this summer. A 7-footer with all-star pedigree, unique offensive tools, and a contract that conveniently expires after next season. But when you dig deeper, something doesn't sit right. In fact, the more you examine the situation, the more you realize this asset might be more of a ticking time bomb. And if he's truly the most tradable piece on Boston's roster, that's not just ironic, it's a red flag, according to Marks. Steam. Most rival teams continue to regard Kristaps Porzingis as the most movable Boston vet, thanks to the Latvian big man's $30.7 million expiring contract. Not his impact, not his scoring, not his rim protection, just the expiring deal. That alone tells you everything about how the league views him right now. And it's not flattering, because here's the brutal truth no one wants to say out loud. Kristaps Porzingis' trade value is built on the assumption that he won't be around for long. Let that sink in. We're not talking about a star being shopped for high-end assets. We're talking about a 7'3" rental whose main selling point is getting off his money. And yet, somehow, he's Boston's best hope of cleaning up their cap sheet. That's not a good sign. That's a crisis, disguised as flexibility. Why? Is this such a problem for Boston? Because the Celtics don't just need to make a trade, they need to make a smart one. The new CBA and second apron restrictions are brutal. They can't afford to miss. And yet, if Porzingis is the most appealing piece they have, and his on-court value is tanking, what exactly are they expecting in return? Let's not gloss over this. Porzingis had a disastrous postseason. He barely cleared 20 minutes in a single game during the New York series. His body betrayed him again, sidelined by a mysterious illness that has lingered since March. In a playoff run where Boston desperately needed his scoring and spacing, Porzingis was a ghost. And it wasn't just this year. This has been the story his entire career. Flashes of brilliance, undermined by breakdowns, setbacks, and long absences. For every highlight reel dunk or clutch three, there's an MRI, a minutes restriction, or an injury update that throws everything off course. So if Porzingis is the most tradable piece because he's not expected to stay healthy or be re-signed, that's not a strategy, that's damage control. And yet, that might be exactly why he gets moved. Teams on the outside looking in might see the illusion of upside. A stretch five who can space the floor, defend the rim, and run post-ups. Sure, the expiring contract just makes it easier to stomach, especially for franchises desperate to shed long-term deals and hit the reset button without tanking. The Lakers, they've got bloated contracts and a need for rim protection. Maybe Porzingis next to Anthony Davis creates the front court wall they've been lacking. Of course, this also reopens old wounds from the Luka Porzingis Dallas disaster. Does anyone really think a rerun of that failed experiment makes sense? The Pelicans, they've been searching for someone to put next to Zion who can shoot and block shots. But would they really risk their already fragile chemistry for a one-year rental with major injury baggage? Even the Heat or Magic, both defensive-minded, playoff-caliber teams, might consider him, but not for talent, for timing. Porzingis represents a short-term swing with no strings attached. They're not betting on him to lead them anywhere. They're betting on him to expire. And that's where it gets dark. When an expiring contract becomes your best trade asset, it means teams want the absence of the player more than the player himself. Think about how insane that is. Porzingis isn't being viewed as a contributor. He's being viewed as cap relief. That's usually what you say about washed-up vets who aren't expected to suit up at all. Not 28-year-olds with all-star seasons on their resumes. So here's the million-dollar question. Is Porzingis really a trade chip, or a placeholder Boston needs to quietly cut ties with? This raises even deeper issues. What does it say about the Celtics' roster construction that they might need to attach assets just to get off Jrue Holiday, while simultaneously hoping someone is desperate enough to rent out Porzingis for a season? Is this what happens when you build a super team under the new CBA? Top-heavy contracts, little flexibility, and the desperate hope that someone, anyone, will take your damaged goods off your hands. Maybe the scariest part is this. If Boston trades Porzingis for cap relief, and he ends up recovering his form and dominating somewhere else, they'll have lost an elite skill set for nothing. If they don't trade him, and he misses half the season again, they've wasted another year of their championship window. It's a lose-lose situation disguised as optionality. So now we're left with the real dilemma. Do you move the only player teams are vaguely interested in, knowing his value is almost entirely off-court? Or do you cling to the dream of a healthy Porzingis, even though all evidence suggests that's the exception, not the rule? The Celtics have a title to defend, a tax bill looming, and only 2 contracts they can realistically flip. If this is what their trade market looks like in June, what's it going to look like in August? Or worse, February? Boston fans should be asking themselves one thing. If your most tradable player is someone teams only want for his expiration date, is your roster really championship-proof? Or are the cracks already forming beneath the banner?